to a Hope 1032 podcast.
The Hope Book Club with Katrina Rowe and Natasha Moore, because life's just better with a book.
Hello and welcome to the Hope Book Club with Katrina Rowe and Natasha Moore from the Centre for Public Christianity. And today we have a special guest, Georgia Free from the Finding Hope podcast. In this episode of the Hope Book Club, we're delving into new Australian fiction. Devotion is the new novel from best-selling Australian author Hannah Kent. It's about a Prussian family who relocate to South Australia to escape religious persecution. But it's also about a young girl growing up and trying to understand herself. The Shut-Ins by Katherine Brabon is about a young adult who spends all his time at home alone in his room. When his mother hires a companion to coax him out, she starts to question the pressures and expectations that she feels compelled to live by. And I've been reading The Paris Secret by Natasha Lester, a World War II romance about the female pilots and spies of the women's Air Transport Auxillary and the price these gutsy women paid with their lives. But first, let's hear from Devotion by Hannah Kent.
The light is rising. The wind rises. I lift my face to the sun as it fills the world. If I testify, no one will hear me. Is a story unheard, a story diminished? I cannot believe that. The wind may hear me, perhaps. The wind may yet carry my voice down to the valley, might press it against the ear of a child who will one day wonder at deeper mysteries. The inheritance of miracles. I can be satisfied with that.
Hannah Kent is one of Australia's most acclaimed authors. Her books Burial Rites and The Good People have been translated into over 30 languages and won numerous awards. Her newest work, Devotion, follows a Prussian family who come to South Australia to escape religious persecution. But the main character, Hannah, is dealing with her own personal tragedy. Natasha Moore's been reading this one. Hi, Natasha.
Hi, Katrina.
Have you been a fan of Hannah Kent's other books, Burial Rites and Good People?
Yes, I have. I've read each of her books as they've come out. I'm committed. I distinctly remember first reading Burial Rites back in the day and being just at the same time, I remember distinctly standing in line for a bus and reading it and thinking both, wow, this is amazing. How does she do that with language? And also at the same time, I maybe deeply resent her because she's younger than me, and how is she doing this? And, I was like in my 20s, so she was even younger. But yes, so she has a bit of a reputation for writing quite depressing books. Burial Rites is set in Iceland back in the day. The Good People is in Ireland from a similar time period. I think it's the 19th century. And they are quite dark books in a lot of ways. So this Devotion is meant to be her happy book. I still think it's quite sad and gothic and stuff, but it's probably happier than the others.
Well, that's good.
There's some sunshine in it because it's Australia as well as Europe.
Well, the other one's just sitting on my shelf because I know they're meant to be fabulous, but I also have heard that they are depressing, and I haven't been in the right frame of mind to take on a depressing book. So I'm glad to hear that this one is a little more upbeat. What's Devotion about?
It's really about this girl called Hannah, a teenager, Hannah in the German way, Hanne, and she lives with her family in this Prussian village. They are Lutherans, which means they're kind of persecuted at the time, and they're looking for an out. They're wanting to emigrate. Hannah isn't loving the fact that she's supposed to grow into a woman and there's all these expectations on her, and she doesn't really have any friends because she's just not interested in the things that other girls are interested in. And then a new family moves to the village. They have a daughter called Thea who's her age. And Thea becomes her first kind of real friend and also kind of the love of her life. So it's about their friendship. It's about the community upping and moving to the other side of the world. So you have a portion of the book that's kind of in the village and with the beauty of the natural world within Prussia. And then you have a portion that's on board the ship for quite some time for a very grueling, arduous voyage. Lots of detail, lots of bodily odors and excretions. And then once the community arrives in South Australia and tries to kind of build a new community, sort of rebuild their old village in this new place, the settlement that they build is based on Harndorf, which a lot of people will know is kind of just outside Adelaide. So it has those three parts to it.
I really relate to this, Natasha, because that's my own family's story. My mum's family, migrated to South Australia to flee religious persecution as Congregationalists and to start their new religious community.
So this is the Hannah Kent novel for you, I think.
It probably is. I love too that this book has quite a vast scope, starting in Prussia, as you said, spending quite a bit of time on the ship and then moving to South Australia. Did you feel drawn into Hannah's journey as she goes through this big life change?
I did. I mean, Kent's writing is just so beautiful. And I'm not the biggest fan of kind of historical fiction. And some people really love the detail. Like, it takes so much research and she does it. I mean, not that I'm an expert on the period or the places, but she does such a beautiful job of painting a picture and, the clothes and the customs and all that kind of thing. That's not what usually gets me in. I thought she did it very well and it was interesting. But the second half of the novel, I don't want to kind of give too much away because there's, a significant twist somewhere in the middle. But the second half is essentially a ghost story. And told in a way that I haven't come across before. And so even though I liked the first half with all the period detail and stuff, it was really the second half that I was like, I'm in. This is really fascinating. I need to kind of know where this is going.
Yeah. And I'm interested in the spirituality of the book because her family are Lutherans, and that's a big part of her family culture and identity. But how is her religion depicted and how does she personally relate to the faith of her family?
I thought this was really sensitively and interestingly done. I think it would have been really easy to write this book as a kind of opposition between, the strict faith, like this very close-knit religious community which polices a lot of conduct and difference and that kind of thing. It would have been really easy to have that as kind of a negative thing and then have Hannah's love of nature and her feelings for Thea as, in opposition to that. But what Kent does is much more, I think, subtle and interesting. So Hannah really does, she's steeped in the religious language and the religious beliefs of her community. And she kind of learns a lot, grows a lot, but doesn't kind of reject all that. But she weaves that kind of language and appreciation into both what she's discovering about herself and this new land that she's come to where nature is different, where her spirit responds differently to the world around her. And so, the religious language is kind of core all the way along, and that spiritual reality is core all the way along. So not in kind of conventional religious ways, but, she loves her family and she loves her community despite her difficulties with them. And so I really loved the complexity of that.
Mm. And so who do you think would enjoy this book, Natasha?
I think the people who like historical novels and historical detail will have a ball with it. People who like beautiful prose, because Kent is just a wizard and a genius, particularly in the second half. I think in the Australian landscape and with the ghost story element. I think if you're I want a page turner with lots of event and stuff, maybe Hannah Kent is not for you. But otherwise, I think it's a really beautiful book.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. That's Natasha Moore from the Centre for Public Christianity. We've been talking about Devotion by Hannah Kent. Well, next we move to The Shut-ins by Katherine Brabon. It's an Australian novel set in Japan. It's about loneliness and isolation. Hikaru is a young adult who spends all his time at home alone in his room. When his mother hires a companion to coax him out, she starts to question the pressures and expectations that she's living by. Georgia Free from the Finding Hope podcast is stepping up today. Thank you, Georgia. Look, I should say, very last minute inclusion this morning because Carl's actually not well. So thank you for jumping on board.
Not a problem at all.
So this term that they use to describe people like Hikaru is called hikikomori. I know you can say it better than I can.
Hikikomori. Yeah.
Okay. Georgia knows Japanese. So what does that refer to?
So it's a term that was actually coined in Japan for those who basically retreat to their rooms for a period of 6 months or more. It's a very foreign concept kind of here in Australia, but in Japan, if you understand the culture, it is very work-centric. So you kind of go through school, through uni. It's very much a meritocracy. It's achievement-based. And for people who don't kind of fit into that, there's really no space for them in the system. So essentially, you retreat to your rooms. If you're not able to cope with the daily pressures of the world, it can become really hard. So there is this whole kind of, I don't know if movement's the right word, but there is definitely a whole community of people, especially in Japan, called hikikomori, who basically just cannot cope with this demanding pressure of Japanese culture.
And so do they sort of treat that like an illness that has to be fixed?
Very much so. There is a lot of shame around this. It is very much a shameful term in Japan. It causes a lot of familial shame as well. So a lot of shame on your family name. It's a very bizarre thing to think about here, but it's very much something that's becoming more and more common, especially in the pandemic. It's something that the world is kind of taking more notice of. And I realized I noticed that the ABC News actually did an article and kind of investigation into the concept of hikikomori late last year. So it's definitely something that's getting more kind of traction and a really interesting concept if you want to delve into it. It's bizarre.
Yeah. Okay. And so tell us more about the main character. What else is going on for him?
Yeah. So Hikaru, it's kind of, the book is told in 4 parts. It was a really unique take on it. So basically 4 different characters of 4 different time frames of the book, and it tells them from their perspective. So it starts with a character called Mai, who is an old high school classmate of Hikaru. So she hasn't seen Hikaru in several years, and she ends up running into his mum at the train station. So Mai had kind of moved on with her life. She's a part-time teacher. She's married to someone we never know the name of. It's somewhat of an unhappy marriage. She's expected to kind of get pregnant and quit her job as a teacher, and she doesn't want to do that. So she's kind of facing her own, I guess, difficulties. And Hikaru's mum, they get to talking, and she hires her essentially to become a companion to Hikaru. So she comes every few weeks, writes him letters, and the mum pays her to essentially try to coax him out of his room. And you get to see that journey.
So I know, Georgia, that you've studied Japanese and you've spent time in Japan. Did you enjoy the Japanese setting, and did the book really take you back there?
Loved it. I think that was a big reason of why I love this book so much. I think it was really authentic. Katherine Brabon herself has spent time in Japan. She was actually funded to go over in 2017 by the Arts Department of Victoria. So she spent significant time there, and actually the each section of the book is forwarded with her author's notes about kind of her time in Japan and how she actually kind of felt really lonely and isolated, and she understood after being there for a significant amount of time how hikikomori could exist there. So it was really kind of interesting to flashback between fiction and then nonfiction, which is her reflections of being there.
This is reminding me of that movie Lost in Translation.
Yes.
The similar feeling to it. What's her writing style like?
I find it it's very unique. It's nothing like I've read before. I think she delves into people's characters really, really well, delves into people's mindsets, and really makes you think throughout the whole book. I wouldn't say the book is Christian by any means, but it has some spiritual themes. She talks about a concept called akiragawa, which means the other side. And it's basically a constant reflection throughout the book of these characters wanting to be somewhere they're not, wanting to be on the other side, whatever that looks like for them. So I think as well as it being a work of fiction, you really want to know what happened to these characters. You really want to know if Hikaru gets out of his room. That's the kind of whole thing of the book. But it's also what she does brilliantly is she makes you reflect on your own life and think, wow, am I really living this life to the best, that I can be, the happiest version of myself, or am I just in a society that doesn't really serve me? It has stayed with me throughout the last few weeks since I finished it.
Well, it also feels very timely with the pandemic. Did you really connect with that feeling that you have in lockdown or when you're in ISO?
I think if I had read this before March 2020, I wouldn't have felt the same. This is definitely a very timely book. And look, it only came out in July last year. So I do think a lot of these experiences were a result of being in isolation. I found it extremely timely. And we're seeing, things like the Great Resignation and people moving, you're about to move, change jobs and things like that. People are really reevaluating their life choices. I think that this book is just a really great way to kind of just get yourself questioning, what's important in life and am I living the life I want to live?
Yeah, I like that. I also read Katherine Brabon said that being in lockdown helped her to connect more with the feelings you have in your body and what goes on for you physically when you do spend all your time shut in, which I thought was really interesting. So who do you think would enjoy this one, Georgia?
I think for starters, anyone who loves Japanese culture, has been to Japan, is just going to love the settings in this book. She does it so authentically and beautifully. But I would recommend this probably for late teens and above. Anyone who's in that kind of loves a really philosophical book. I would say the ending satisfied me. May not satisfy a lot of other people if you're looking for, to tie up loose ends and in a nice little package. It's definitely a book that keeps you thinking long after you finish it. So
that's a great review, Georgia. Thank you very much. And that review prepared with 15 minutes notice as well, I just want to say. So thank you so much, Georgia. You've done really well. That was Georgia Free reviewing The Shut-Ins by Katherine Brabon. So look, before we get to my book, ladies, we three have something in common that you may not know about, and that is moving, right? So I'm about to move to the Riverina. I know for a fact, Georgia, that you moved into your first new apartment not long ago. And Natasha, you're planning a move as well. And the confronting thing about a move, which I'm sure you ladies have felt as deeply as I am feeling it right now, is that you feel like you're supposed to cull your books. Because they're so heavy and they take up so many boxes. And so have you been through this culling process? How did you decide what to chuck and what to keep? Let's start with you, Georgia.
I definitely did go through a culling process. I had to because I live on the third floor and I just know that I would have broken my back if I bought all my books. I have a lot of unread books and I am very sentimental about the books that I have read, about keeping them. So the way I did it is I actually had to go through the blurb and I did a quick scan, and if I'm not going to read it in a year or two, I'm going to chuck it. So I only kept the ones that I imminently, did want to read, although it's still almost a very full kind of floor-to-ceiling bookcase full of books. So it was a lot of bags to carry up the stairs, but worth it. So worth it.
Well, for me, I am way more likely to give away a book I haven't read than one I have if I loved it, because I want to hang on to the books that I've loved, whereas the potential is easier for me to part with, if you know what I mean. So like you, like any book that I deeply loved, even if I'm not going to read it again, that stays because that's part of my story. But if it's something that I'm like, I wouldn't mind reading it, but probably not, as you said, like immediately. They're the ones that just had to go. And I also tend to really favour books that might be hard to replace. So anything that's really old or that's been handed down through the family, all that I hang on to. And if it's something I know I can get from the library, then they're the ones that go to Vinnie's.
Gosh, I'm sitting here, I'm like sort of shocked and sort of impressed that you guys actually did cull, because I didn't even realize that. Like I sort of considered it. So I moved into my current place about 18 months ago, and so that was so this is the first time in about 15 years, maybe longer, that all my books have been in one place after kind of moves around the world and so on. And I thought when I was packing the books, I was like, oh, I should probably cull them, but I don't have time. I'll do it at the other end. Did I do it at the other end? Of course not. And now, so I have all my books, so many books, they're overflowing. And then I'm planning to move to Adelaide later in the year because I'm getting married. But the problem is that my fiance, you won't believe this, but he has even more books than I do.
Oh, no.
Quite a long way.
You're going to need a whole extra room just for your books.
Yeah, I think we'll have to reinforce some floors or ceiling. I don't quite know how that's going to work.
Well, look, I am reassured, Natasha, to hear that you are marrying a book lover. I didn't want to ask because if I said to you, does he read, and you'd said no, I would have been heartbroken.
You would have found it difficult to hide your disapproval of our love.
So that's good to hear.
Fear not.
Well, on to my read. So this was something really different for me. It's interesting, Natasha, to hear you say you're not a big fan of detail and historical fiction and that sort of thing. I've actually been reading The Paris Secret by Natasha Lester, which is historical fiction. It's beautifully executed with two distinct timelines. So we have in the World War II era, two sisters. Their story starts in childhood. But most of it sort of happens, in sort of young adulthood. Sky's really an outdoorsy, adventurous girl. She loves the beach and she flies aeroplanes, which she learnt from her mother. And look, she's frustrated because when war breaks out, women aren't allowed to be fighter pilots, and they're not allowed to fly the fighter planes like the Spitfires and the Hurricanes, and they're definitely not allowed to fly the big bombers like the Lysanders. But she signs up with the ATA, which is the Air Transport Auxillary. What they're allowed to do is transport planes from one place to another. So they literally just move them from one airbase to another so that the fighter pilots supplying planes basically. But later she becomes recruited by SOE to become a spy. Now, that's the historical timeline. In the present day, we have fashion conservator and divorced mum of two, Kat Jordan. She finds a priceless collection of Christian Dior gowns at her grandmother's Cornwall cottage and sets about trying to solve the mystery of how her grandmother acquired them. Now, you might be thinking, why doesn't she just ask her grandmother? Because her grandmother is still alive. But there is something very traumatic in her grandmother's past that she refuses to speak about. And this is the mystery that Kat needs to solve without kind of upsetting her very elderly grandmother. So
presumably these stories are interrelated.
Oh, of course.
Yes. No, just random separate stories in one novel. Okay.
Yes, there is a blood relationship between these characters, but also within this are two romances. So we have Sky's relationship with her old childhood friend Nicholas, who is unfortunately engaged to an enigmatic French woman. And as Nicholas and Sky kind of reacquaint themselves in adulthood, with the craziness of war, things are not all as they seem as they get drawn into these sort of special operations that involve dropping spies into France. And there's also a modern day romance with Kat and an author.
Okay, I have a question, Katrina. It's a delicate question.
Okay.
So I just, I love a good World War II novel, but come on. Yet another one.
Yes, do we need another?
And it's another one about, the SOE. It's another one about the women of the SOE. We're not done with this. Does this do something different?
I know what you mean, Natasha, because I've read a lot of these books too. Look, Natasha Lester did a great job, a really great job with the history, the female characters, with flying, the technical aspects of flying, and these women pilots and their whole struggle to be recognised, to be allowed to fly the bigger planes, and the ringer that they will put through to kind of prove themselves. That part of the book is where, for me, this really shines. I hadn't read a lot about female pilots other than Nancy Bird, I think. I didn't love the romantic elements of this book as much. only because I think one romance is enough for me. Having two going on was a bit much.
Good to know that about yourself as a reader.
I don't like to read romances. I like to read books with romantic elements. And if the romance kind of takes over too much of the story, I do start to lose interest. So for me, I loved the narrative and I loved, I loved the adventure of it. I loved the characters, but I did find the level of detail in the romance sort of made it a bit less romantic for me. I think I like romances that don't get consummated, where it's all just kind of
up to your imagination.
Yes.
So do you feel like romance readers would find the technical flight details and stuff a bit much? Like, does this book?
I don't think they would. I got to give Natasha Lester great credit for this. The way she writes, we were talking about historic detail. Somehow she does all that. It's never boring. Like she doesn't get bogged down with historic details. She makes it about the person, the character's response to those things that are happening. And so you actually care about the character. And so all those details get really very skillfully woven into the story. And I think the structure of the story is very well constructed as well. And so with those two elements, it was enough for me, even though with the romance I was a bit like, oh, this is a bit much.
Not as romantic as you used to be, Katrina.
Yeah, maybe that's just it, but yeah. All right. Well, thanks, ladies. It's been lovely chatting with you.
Thank you.
You too.
Yeah. Hey, if you want to contact us, you can email bookclub@hopemedia.com.au. And we do hope you've enjoyed this edition of the Hope Book Club, looking at great new Australian fiction. In this episode, we have reviewed Devotion by Hannah Kent, The Shut-Ins by Katherine Brabon, and The Paris Secret by Natasha Lester. Thanks for listening to the Hope Book Club, because life's just better with a book.
Hope 1032. Thanks for listening.